So our next speaker is Dr. Richard Murray. So he first studied a undergraduate and master's in physics at the University of Southampton, where he then went on to do his PhD in quantum optics. Following that, he's had a long and diverse career. Just to mention some of the things he's done, he's led Innovate UK's activities in quantum technologies and been a business development manager at Teledyne ETV. And he's currently co-founder and CEO of ORCA Computing, a startup based in London working on fibre optical quantum computing based on the research of Professor Ian Walmsley's Oxford group. And his talk is going to be about career planning. And I don't think there could be a better person to give a talk on this, considering the diverse career that you've had, Richard. So yeah, take it away.
Thanks for the intro. You got through it well. It puts me in quite a good place to basically describe what different careers look like, because I've had quite a few. So really interesting talk. Just a second ago, I guess, to be honest with you, like, I will describe a lot about what life in industry is like, because I think generally speaking, people in universities don't really know, and tend to sort of maybe make some mistakes about what life is like. So hopefully, I mean, I'll be clear, my intention here is to sort of make everyone less scared about the jump to industry, because largely speaking, it can be as similar as you want it to be to academia. As I'll show through what I've done. So this is my talk, like my career, a random walk through interesting stuff, and that's the way I like to look at it. Sometimes you talk about career planning. I think this title of this talk is about career planning. There's only so much planning you can do, and sort of, it's the classic Muhammad Ali quote, like, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. So, careers are a bit like that. You never quite know what's going to happen to you. Lots of exciting things, surprising, exciting things do happen to you. And a career is sort of just staying on top of those nice surprises, but also trying to chart a course through all this stuff. In terms of what I'll be up to, I'll go through the different stages of my career. I'll give you a little bit of flavour of how my own career has developed, and hopefully that will allow you to get a sense for what different roles look like. And then I've just got a few nice pieces of advice for you at the end, just in case you're still thinking about it. So like I said at the start, I'll start with a bit of a joke. Like, what does a career look like? How do you plan for a career? Well, I have personally found, a bit like this XKCD comic, that the stuff that you end up doing is sort of related to the stuff that you did around the edges of what you were supposed to be doing. So, this example is one weekend messing around with Perl. My career was sort of defined by a few conferences I went to just for fun in other areas, in like weird areas like sort of biology and how physics applied to biology. And you're always never quite sure where little pieces of interesting information you've picked up around the sides of what you're supposed to be doing actually end up relating to your final career, which is cool. It's really exciting. I guess it also teaches you to pay attention to the other stuff, like, pay attention to different courses or what's going on in the news, because you never quite know when things that you don't think are going to be relevant end up becoming relevant. So where did life start for me? So, like everyone else in quantum computing and quantum technologies, my world started in academia. And that was at the University of Southampton. So I started life doing an undergrad, a master's in physics. Took a ton of different courses. I ended up taking a course in, obviously, lots of physics, in maths, in general relativity, and even I weirdly took a course in international relations at one point, just because I was interested in it. And I guess the common theme here is keep an eye on what you're interested in doing and try and do that stuff. So yeah, I did the undergrad. It was all great. I stayed at the University of Southampton to do a PhD in cold atom physics. So playing around with rubidium gases to drive quantum transitions and things like this. This is a picture of my MOT, magneto-optical trap, that, as you do in PhDs, you sort of love and cherish for 4 years before completely forgetting about. And And that was great. 4 years well spent. At this point, I will say, a bit contrary to the previous talk, at the point where I completed my PhD, I couldn't wait to get out. I could not wait to leave academia. I couldn't wait to get away from universities, and my only route to try and do that was to try and find a job. And I think it is something important to say. I don't know how openly people often are about saying this, but the academic life really wasn't for me. I didn't really ever, this was back in the day when quantum technologies was all very fundamental. I never really saw the point of fundamental science, if I'm honest. And for some of you on the audience, that you will see the point, and that's great. But also I feel like the people who don't quite understand the point, who aren't motivated by fundamental stuff, are sort of forgotten about. And the sort of highlight, the sort of conclusion from a lot of my talk is what I later found. It isn't that I'm not interested in science, it's that I'm not interested in the stuff that doesn't relate to people. And the more and more I sort of move through my career, I love and I get motivated by seeing technologies applied to problems that matter to people. And I guess at the point in my academic career, like watching rubidium gas without any sort of clear link to people and how people will use technologies, just didn't get it, didn't really understand it at the time. And I think that's fine. And if you're in that position as well, chill, don't worry about it, but sort of consider moving to industry after you're done. So that was academia for me. And then luckily enough, after I left academia, I found a job working for a consultant company called TTP. So TTP are based just outside Cambridge. So I moved from Southampton to Cambridge. And what they do is take a lot of cutting edge science and they apply it to problems in industry. And even more than that, they apply it to problems in industry using the customer's money to develop the project. So quite quickly, you end up not doing anything fundamental, but very much doing everything relates to what people in industry, these big companies, want, their challenges. And if that still doesn't make sense to you, so a few sort of examples of that. So a few cool projects. I went to do a piece of work with Oakley, and my project there was sort of going in, they were really worried about their polarizing film. Now, a lot of their sunglasses have iodine-based polarizing film within them. And there was all sorts of problems, and they wanted to basically move away from using iodine as a polarizer. So what I did within TTP for Oakley was to do a little study on these things called wire grid polarizers. So nanostructures in a line basically that cause a polarization effect. And really, really cool project. You get to go over to Oakley in California. You get to get a few sort of cheap pairs of sunglasses. But even more significant for me, in my point in my career, you get to do some really fundamental science. And, you're talking about reading academic papers and sort of trying to build up demonstrators and things like this. But one which relates to, a real problem. And okay, it's sunglasses, it's not changing the world, it's not discovering the electron dipole moment or something. But it's a problem that relates to people. It's a product at the end of the day that people are interested in. And that is the thing that has motivated me through my entire career. And a few other examples, I worked on looking at laser machining of razor blades for Wilkinson sword. Gillette Wilkinson sword. So actually taking a femtosecond laser and whether you can actually sharpen the very tip of a razor blade without causing too much thermal damage to the razor blade. I went to go and do a piece of work for Boeing. So that is a picture of Boeing's factory, which is the largest factory in the world where they assemble aircraft. And Boeing were interested in nanostructured coatings that might go on the outside of aircraft to reduce the skin drag. So again, and I guess you might be following this, sort of wondering, like, how does someone go from quantum physics to looking at coatings on the outside of aircraft? And the answer is sort of, if you're an intelligent person, if you know how to read academic papers, you can sort of apply yourself to anything. And especially with this motivation about working on projects that made a difference to people, this was sort of in my sweet spot. And the final project in the bottom left there, sort of, which was probably an example of the weirdest and most wacky project I worked on. Coca-Cola actually had a problem with foam. So their production lines were generating a ton of foam, and actually wasn't related to Coke, it was related to when they're trying to process cranberry juice, which weirdly, cranberry juice produces a load of foam really easily. So they had these sort of production lines spilling over with loads of foam, and they involved me. They wanted me to look at ways of laser ablating the foam, which from start to finish was a terrible idea. But we did a bunch of work. We shone a bunch of laser beams on foam and found that it didn't make a difference. And we actually investigated the foam itself, and there's a whole load of scientific reasons why I can tell you why it didn't work, but it didn't work. But down to the sort of versatility of you in that role, we didn't give up there. We sort of then moved on to look at vacuum systems, which would help to alleviate their problem of foam, which was something that in the end did work. So I guess this is sort of maybe a stark shift away from academia. This is all of a sudden sort of in this environment where you have a customer who's paying your wages, and they have a ton of problems, and your job is to try and brainstorm, read papers, build demonstrators to help them solve those problems. So very, very versatile, but not, I mean, moving a little bit away from fundamental science, but not moving altogether away from science itself, which is pretty cool. Okay, so sorry, this is a bit of a slide about the science involved in shaving, which was actually pretty interesting. And if you're still thinking that all this work doesn't involve science, it really does. If you try and model the skin's behavior to a razor blade, and these are sort of all sorts of models that we developed for Gillette, looking at the performance of the skin under a razor blade. Skin is actually a really scientifically difficult material to model, like very, very non-linear. And so modeling the performance of a razor blade over skin was definitely a very, very significant scientific challenge, which we got involved in. So, okay, from that, so that's one set of careers. That's a consulting job. Consulting was great fun, by the way, but you're working project to project. It's a little bit scattergun. You don't end up working on anything for any length of time, really, and like quite competitive, to be honest. Like everyone was sort of a bit of their own agent, a little bit of an internal market for your time. Then I went to go and work for government. So this is all of a sudden complete role change, and now all of a sudden I'm a very small cog in a very big system. So your role working for government is to write lots and lots of reports, sit down and sort of think about strategy and policy, but sort of to know that those reports don't affect anything directly. You're sort of, as I say, this small cog in a big wheel. But it was great. I mean, I got to see lots of companies, talk to lots of academics, had a lot of fun. But you're in this very different type of role, not directly in sort of able to influence anything directly. So then I left government, Innovate UK, and I went to go and work for this company, Teledyne ETV. And this is where the quantum stuff started to come back. So Teledyne ETV, if you know, builds quantum clock systems and quantum gravity sensors based on basically the stuff I did in my PhD. And so, the project there was basically taking a cold atom rubidium interferometer and trying to get the thing to work so that it measured gravity. That's challenge number one, but also measured gravity while being outside. So all of a sudden, there's a lot of engineering activity to make the system robust enough so you can put it on a cart and wheel it outside. Definitely not trivial and definitely not simple or easy to do. But my role in Teledyne, again, had shifted somewhat. So I guess to understand this sort of evolution of careers and things, I guess I was involved in Teledyne more as a manager. And if the word manager strikes you with fear, as it sort of maybe did in the last presentation, again, I don't think it needs to be. Like, okay, your management maybe sort of doesn't completely depart from the science. You're still overseeing people doing science. It's just not your job to actually be in the lab and do it. So that involved all sorts of things, like basically sort of trying to understand and set the direction for the group. So trying to understand what the priorities were, try and work with people who are working in the group to understand what they were working on and how they were finding it difficult or easy and how they were getting on with other people. All sorts of other things like working with customers. And again, back to the point of my talk, the thing that I worked out that was the most motivating thing for me was like working with people. I love working with people, and that was a sort of a scratch that an itch that I could never scratch in academia, where there's very little sort of people element to things. More and more in my sort of commercial career, the sort of job I do relates to talking to people and finding out within a company what they're trying to do and what technologies could be used in order to help them address their problems. So really, really related to getting on with people, sort of figuring out what's challenging them, trying to figure out, you know, how much budget they've got available. And it's not black and white often. It often relates to like personal relationships with other people and feelings and understanding of people and their needs and things. So that's sort of maybe the move to management. I guess last talk maybe made it sound like, you know, management is just all about, you know, writing reports and sitting down in front of big spreadsheets. It can be, but it can also just be about sort of getting in touch with people and making sure that everyone's happy in their role, which yeah, I think that if you think that's warm and fluffy and not hard, you know, that's definitely not true. People, I think, in my career remain the biggest challenge, the biggest uncertainty, the biggest unknown in any role that I've done. So I went back to industry, you know, industry part 2 at Teledyne, and that was all fun, but Teledyne, very big company. And I guess the other point to note if you're moving into industry is to very much observe and look at the company you're moving into. No two companies are ever the same. And there's a huge difference between a tiny company and a very large company. And actually there are very big differences between very large companies in terms of culture and what they're trying to do and things that's important to note. So from large company, I decided always that I'd love to start a company. And just after that, I had the opportunity to be involved in starting ORCA. So it was sort of collaboration between myself and 2 other academics. So Josh Nunn from University of Bristol and Ian Walmsley from Oxford and now Imperial. So it was cool. It was sort of, you know, getting together with these academics and working out an idea for a company that would make a difference. And I guess my input into the company process is to treat it seriously. It's not a sort of side job, it's a career. It's something that you can use to, you know, grow a team and support yourself. So ORCA's doing quantum computing with single photons. So, you know, at a technical level, we're taking single units of light, we do parametric down conversion to make single photons, single units of light. And then we rely on a bunch of, you know, really fast electronics and a bunch of, you know, quite fundamental theory to be able to use that to perform computation. And here's a really important point, which is that, you know, within ORCA, we are doing truly fun, groundbreaking science. And so it definitely is not the case that you give up that stuff when you move to industry. So, okay, full disclosure, I don't do that stuff in the company, but we do employ loads of PhDs and people who, you know, are going through their career who are sort of slightly more experienced. And these people still do really, really exciting science. And the way we do it is quite different. You know, we do it in a very fast-paced way. If they need to buy something, I basically just wave the company credit card at them and instruct them to buy it as quickly as possible. But we still do, the framework of doing fundamental science is still there. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is, even though you go to industry, this stuff is relatively similar to what you'd find in an academic lab. And it's still really cutting edge science. So you do not, especially at this point in time when quantum computing is being funded commercially, you do not have to give up fundamental science if you move into a company. So that's what ORCA's doing. And this is sort of cool crossroads between quantum optics, electronics, and theory. My role, you know, I don't want to make it sound less attractive, but my role actually within the company is a little different. So I'm sort of the CEO and sort of leader of the company. But what that means, you know, is for me, in my role, again, the people thing. So I spend a lot of time talking to investors, talking to customers, talking to employees, and basically sort of making sure everyone's happy, finding out where everyone's up to. So there's a very, very strong people role in what I do, which is something I love. I love working with people. I love making sure everyone's happy and things like that. There is also a lot of time in front of spreadsheets. You know, this is something which, you know, in my role I enjoy. So again, like, do what you enjoy doing. I actually quite like sitting in front of a huge spreadsheet and going, okay, you know, what does the budget actually look like? And is that actually going to be accurate? And what happens if I spend less on this piece of equipment? Can I spend more on this piece of equipment? So spreadsheets is, not to sound too sad, is something that really excites me. And you can call me sad in the questions and answers if you like. But hey, newsflash, careers are about doing what you like, well, not what other people think you should like. And you know, it's a startup. So the picture in the bottom there is about a picture of someone hoovering. So Yes, I do our hoovering within the office. And in a startup, it's a little bit like all the jobs need doing. Even if you've got a PhD and 10 years experience in industry, you still got to do the hoovering. You still got to make the coffee in the morning. So there's quite a nice sort of all hands on deck sort of aspect to a startup, which again, I really like. So there you go. So I've painted different pictures of careers: academia, so small consulting company, big government, big company, and then startup. And I think the rest of my advice is now very focused on the career planning point of the talk. Like, how do you, and in the audience, I guess you're sitting there wondering what you do. How do you work out which choice to make? Lots of different choices. Each choice makes a big difference. It makes a huge difference depending on what you end up doing. How do you work out what to do? I've got a piece of advice here. It is really important that you try to figure out what you really want. And I really mean what you want, and my parents were a big impact in my life. My dad really wanted me to do a PhD. I always saw it as really important, which is probably the reason I did that. When you start planning your career, you stop caring so much about what your parents want or what your teachers want or what your professor wants. And it's really important to really dig deep and think about what you really enjoy doing and just aim at that. You might be distracted, you might be pulled in different directions, aim at the thing you want to do. So some questions to ask yourself, like, do you see yourself in a big corporate? So you might wear a suit into the office, you might have a sort of big high-powered job. Or do you prefer a small startup where it might be less sort of less powerful? You might be but you might sort of get more done. Do you want a high risk reward or a stable career? So do you want to take a few bets on what you're doing, or do you want something maybe a bit more like the big corporate thing that sort of just pays the bills every day and you're pretty certain you're going to be employed in 3 years' time? Do you want to be left alone at work, or do you want to be working with people? A huge choice to make, huge choice. Like, do you want, literally, there are jobs where you are just left alone, academia included, but there are also jobs a bit like mine where my job is about linking up other people. So I can't do my job on my own. I need to work with other people. That's a personal choice that you need to make. Do you want to be a cog in the machine, or do you want to be independent? Similar to the above, like, do you want to be on your own where your work matters for the thing you're doing? Or do you want to be dependent on the interactions of other people and all of the frustrations that might present to you, and then interesting challenges? Then more practically, but still just as important, do you want to relocate? Do you want to live where you are, or do you want to move? If you want to move, how far do you want to move? Will you move to another country? And within the job itself, how much time do you want to spend away from home? Because some jobs will require that you're away from home a lot, some not at all. So hopefully a few questions just to ask yourself about what you really want. And it's important, people in an interview will pick up on, if you don't think you know what you want, then that's sort of obvious. Like, people want to see in an interview that you've thought about what you want, and what you want is to get the job that you're interviewing for. So it makes a big difference. Okay, and then what have I learned? So a little bit of a whistle-stop tour. Be confident. So one thing I will say, especially going through academia, I find that it's not exactly an environment to build confidence. Like, to the previous speaker's points, there's a lot of rejection, which is like sort of not actually proportional with how capable you are. So be confident in the total labor pool. You are the cream of the cream. Your skills, your analytical skills, your scientific skills are as good as skills as anyone is going to get. So that definitely should allow you to be confident in approaching and thinking about what you do. And by the way, even if you decide to go into an adjacent career, you might go and want to do marketing, you might want to go and work at a bank, that skill base will apply to those other careers and should make you confident in those other careers as well. But please don't be arrogant. There's nothing worse than a really technical person who thinks they know everything, especially something early on in their career where often they don't know a lot. Well, there'll be lots of gaps in your understanding, especially coming out of academia. So please sort of don't be arrogant. And related to that, always seek opportunities to broaden your skills. Always look at every opportunity. If something seems a bit weird, something's frustrating, seek to sort of learn from it and build from it. So be like this sponge for information to just absorb experiences and things. no two companies are created equal. So do your research, think about the company you want to join, like look at the products that that company has, look at this. Don't think that people in the industry are the stupid ones. Like, it's such an annoying, sometimes not all a universal trait from academia, and that's not true. Apologies if my internet's breaking a little bit. And finally, second from last, be proactive. So get out there, talk to people, send CVs across, and just chase people for input. And finally, never stop learning, because that's the thing that has already differentiated yourself, will differentiate you. You're a highly educated person. That puts you in a great position to keep absorbing information and keep learning. So sorry if that was very quick. That was a whole bunch of different stuff, hopefully useful to you, to empower you to choose the most important thing in your life, which is what you do with your career. And the final thing I'll say is, if any of that sounds interesting, then we've got a bunch of job applications open. I guess the final point I'll make is, the list of roles that we are interested in interviewing for is not just listed on our webpage. So, and that's probably true with all companies. So if you want to go for work for a company, send them a CV, whether or not the job seems to exist or not. And that's true for us. So check us out and let me know if you have any questions. Cool, thank you.
Thanks, Richard. That talk was great. And I think everyone, all our attendees have enjoyed it as well, because we've got a whole bunch of questions. So yeah, to kick things off, we've got 2 questions that are kind of quite similar. The first one says, what sort of roles in industry are appropriate for someone with a strong theoretical background and 0 hands-on / technical skills? And then the second one, which I'll ask because it's quite similar, how would you recommend making the very first step into industry? I worry that my current expertise is way too sterile and fundamental, and will struggle to connect it to a company's goals, even though I think I'd be a great candidate.
Well, let me just say as a starter, like, back to my point, be confident. So, I really mean this. If you were to look across the labour pool, like the sort of people who are in roles at the moment, look at sort of where the best paid jobs are, where most companies are interested in recruiting. It's all technical. It's all like high class, scientific, analytical, mathematical based experiences. I would try and move away from, part of my advice is maybe try and apply what you've learned in your PhD to a job. That's maybe the starting point. But what's probably more likely to emerge are roles that are related to your knowledge. And the 2 roles that I mentioned there, like, are you kidding me? Theory roles, take that, apply it if you wanted to, take that, go work as a quant for a bank. They do really complex analytical models of financial markets. Go join a machine learning company, you're just probably the best candidate that I can imagine at mathematical and analytic abilities. And that desire for candidates that have those skills will be everywhere. So the first thing I'd say is sort of have confidence. And secondly, in broad terms, I'd say look at your general skills. And for sure you have them, being a sort of more on the theory side in terms of analytics and maths and theory, and see if you can apply those to jobs. And then, maybe practically speaking, the way you go and get a job is you go to careers fairs, you send off CVs, you look at websites, but I guess to my point, you try and work out what type of company you want to go and work for. And then once you've worked out that, just fire loads of CVs at them and see what sticks, and just have fun and try and work out what you want to do.
Cool. Thank you. That was a great answer. Another question we've got is, what skills should a PhD student aspiring to get into research consultancy cultivate in themselves? Are there any freelancing research consultancy jobs they can do? Does it matter if their PhD is academic or with an industrial partner?
Yeah, load of questions there. I'll try and answer all of them. I think it does help if your PhD has links to industry. But you know, if it doesn't, there's nothing to stop you gaining that experience another way, like, you know, going off on your own merit and trying to find a job. I think the freelance thing is hard. I would really say if you're just if you're just graduating from academia and PhD, starting out as a company in your own right is, you know, if you fancy taking on a risk, do it, but it's a lot of work. And you know, imagine you'll be going up and you're trying to talk to BP, for example, like big company, and say, hey, you know, come and work with me, let me sell you some of my time. It's quite hard going. But again, a way you can try and do that is just have a go, like put aside 3 months of savings to just say, right, I'm going to go contact loads of companies and see if they'll buy my time. So try it. But if I was you, I would try and there are lots of consulting companies out there. There's lots around Cambridge. There's lots in general, you know, around London and things. It is quite good to try and learn the art of being a consultant first. Like, there's a whole process you have to go through being a consultant. And so try and get a job. And you know, the way you do that is by sending a CV across to those companies. Last thing, I think the last question was, how do I prepare myself for that? Being a consultant, the interview process I went through to get into TTP was very broad. You know, that you go in, they ask you these like Google style questions, like, you know, I've got 2 balls, different weights, same size. How do I tell which one's the heavier one? You know, those types of things. So just sort of, I don't know, you just prepare for the interview, I guess.
All right, great, thanks. Could I ask, do you have I don't know, an extra 5 minutes or so, because we've got a lot of questions.
Yeah, I do. I'm sorry for run over. Yeah.
No, it's fine. You were completely on time. But yeah, we've just got so many questions. So another one from Joe, our previous speaker, which I thought was quite interesting. It says, thanks for the talk. As a specialized PhD, did you get bored working on random projects outside your interest in consultancy? I've heard of medical doctors tasked to look at the manufacture of paint, etc.
Really good question. I think that is a risk. And no, I'll be honest, yeah, there were a few projects that I hated. Like, I was involved in one to set up like a pump system. So yes, I think the danger of what I've just said, and Joe's completely right to highlight this, is that you sort of find yourself doing stuff that doesn't intellectually stimulate me. And I've always been quite careful about, and to be honest, I've probably changed jobs a few times because of this, because I felt I was getting too much. I've always been quite careful to avoid projects that don't stimulate me. And I think that is right. That's a risk in industry, that there are some sort of less stimulating jobs that you just have to, I guess, recognize that you're not really enjoying it and try and find something else. I guess there's a bit of, sometimes you just have to put up with it for a certain time, but sometimes it gets too much. But by the way, the breadth of tasks in itself wasn't something that I found boring or not stimulating. I loved trying to apply what I knew in optics to, I don't know, electronics or electronic project, or the aircraft thing was really weird, like, but very stimulating. So it wasn't necessarily the breadth or away from my, I've never really had a thing that was my thing, like my academic sort of, so I'd never really had that to be worried about moving away from that. I just sort of always seeked out interesting problems.
All right, great, thanks for that answer. So yeah, another question we've got is, having worked with multiple companies, this must have given you a unique perspective. Would you recommend a similar approach to build your skill set versus sticking with the same company?
I'll answer honestly, which is that I always found it useful for my own career to sort of jump around a bit. Was it the right choice looking back? I mean, I don't know. You do really well if you just stick at one company for a long time and sort of grow and evolve through the system. I think that's a sort of personal choice. For me, I guess I saw like the opportunities not emerge in the way that I wanted them to, and also saw the tasks maybe found myself in areas that I wasn't so interested in which case sort of I just sort of jumped into something else. I don't think I'm able to say what's the right choice. I think it's just I think the point is just about being observant about where you are and what you want, and make the choices. I always try and strive for lots of opportunities and things, but sometimes having to make that tricky choice to jump ship. I don't know. Yeah, you'll have to work it out. It hasn't been too bad for my career, but maybe I would have been better off staying put with one company. You know, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it's always difficult to tell, and I'm sure, had you stuck with one company for longer, there's no necessarily like wrong choice. It's about finding them, like maximizing the most optimal choice. But yeah,
it's so hard, and I suppose all of us as physicists, we always try and strive from the optimal position, optimal decision. I don't think you ever know. It's always grey, and you end up in these positions of being like, do I really want to work here? Like yesterday was pretty rubbish, but the day before that was great, and in the end you just sort of just do it or you don't do it. And it's always something you think about a lot for the rest of your life, basically. Like, I still think about TTB, like, should I say that TTB, it was a really cool job, like government was great, like, it's you never know.
Yeah. Cool. Right, maybe I'll ask one more question, just because there are quite a few, but perhaps if the ones that we didn't have time to answer, if people want to post them in Slack,
Yeah, for sure.
you could potentially have a look at them and answer them offline. So I guess well, I guess there's a question you talked about, well, you briefly mentioned, I'll briefly answered. So someone asks, you divided the people in academia into fundamental, science curious and application oriented, and recommended the latter to consider industry. Do you think the former could also succeed and have fun in industry?
Yeah, so sorry if I made that distinction. Like, I didn't mean to categorize people at all, because I think everyone's different and all roles are. I really think anyone in academia has a lot to offer an industrial job. So whether you're theoretical, whether you're applied, whether you're in humanities or whether you're in science, you have a ton of skills that are very, very relevant to going and working in industry. And this is something I say very strongly, because I do feel like people in academia are worried about making the jump. Once you do it, it takes a bit of planning. It's really nothing to worry about. You'll end up in a job that's nice. Like, people in industry are nice. So it's not as cutthroat as you might imagine. The job is probably pretty fulfilling, especially if you do a good job of selecting it. And no matter probably what your academic background is, you might need to move away from your area of research, which makes no difference in industry. You will be expected to sort of be a lot more flexible. We interview some people who are like, hey, my academic area of research is this. Can I do this one thing in your company? And the answer is, well, no, because we probably want you to make the coffee, and we probably want you to work on this if it emerges as something interesting. So as long as you're okay with that, which I think you probably should be, then you've got nothing to worry about going into and finding an industrial role. And if you want to your point about Slack, if you want to message me on Slack, I'm more than happy to specifically help individuals sort of make that jump or work out how they might jump, or I shouldn't call it a jump, I should just call it move. Yeah, it's all good.
All right, great. Thank you very much for the talk, Richard, and for your time. It was great that you could stay for an extra 10 minutes to answer all these questions. And yeah, I'm sure I'm saying this on behalf of everyone. There was a great talk and really informative.
No problem. Thanks everyone.
All right.